There are books that teach techniques, books that offer plans, and books that hand you a sequence of steps. Then there are books that try to change the way you see the world. Rich Dad Poor Dad belongs to that second category. Its lasting influence does not come from complex charts, technical formulas, or detailed investing instructions. It comes from a shift in perspective. Robert T. Kiyosaki asks a simple but unsettling question. What if most people are taught to work for money, but never taught how money actually works? That question sits at the heart of this book, and it is the reason so many readers remember it long after they finish it. The book uses the contrast between two father figures, one cautious and conventional, the other entrepreneurial and financially strategic, to explore two different ways of thinking about work, security, and wealth. Whether you read it as autobiography, metaphor, or motivational financial philosophy, its purpose is clear. It wants to wake the reader up. It wants to challenge the inherited script that says success means getting a good education, finding a stable job, working hard for decades, and trusting that everything will somehow work out. Kiyosaki does not reject work or discipline. Instead, he argues that hard work without financial understanding can leave a person permanently dependent on a paycheck. In this audio summary, we will walk slowly through the book's central ideas, not simply repeating its slogans, but unpacking what they mean, why they resonated so widely, and what practical insights they still offer. We will explore the book's view of assets and liabilities, the emotional traps surrounding money, the idea of financial literacy, the role of entrepreneurship and ownership, and the deeper promise that lies beneath all of it, the promise of freedom. At its best, Rich Dad Poor Dad is not really about becoming flashy or getting rich quickly. It is about learning to see the economic structure of life more clearly. And once that structure becomes visible, many ordinary decisions begin to look very different. The book is organized around a memorable contrast. Kiyosaki describes growing up with the influence of two father figures. One is his real father, whom he calls his poor dad. The other is the father of his childhood friend, whom he calls his rich dad. The poor dad is educated, intelligent, hardworking, respectable, and deeply committed to the conventional path. He believes in studying hard, getting good grades, finding stable employment, and advancing through recognized institutions. He represents the kind of success that society openly admires. The rich dad, on the other hand, represents a different orientation toward life. He values financial education over formal credentials, opportunity over security, and ownership over dependence on wages. He is less interested in appearing respectable and more interested in understanding the rules that shape money, business, and power. The brilliance of this setup is that Kiyosaki is not just comparing two men. He is comparing two mental models. One worldview says that the safest and smartest path is to work hard within the system. The other says that the system itself must be studied, understood, and eventually used to create independence. The poor dad believes in earning. The rich dad believes in building. The poor dad trusts the promises of institutions. The rich dad studies incentives and structures. The poor dad seeks safety first. The rich dad seeks knowledge first because he believes knowledge creates a different kind of safety. This contrast gives the book its emotional and rhetorical force. Many readers recognize both voices inside their own lives. One voice says be careful, do what is expected, avoid mistakes, stay practical. The other voice says learn the game, think independently, and do not confuse social approval with financial wisdom. Kiyosaki's argument is that conventional intelligence and financial intelligence are not the same. A person may be highly educated and still make weak financial decisions. Another person may have less formal education and yet understand assets, opportunity, leverage, and cash flow far better. This idea has a liberating effect on readers because it separates financial possibility from traditional status. It suggests that the world of money is learnable. It is not reserved only for elites, specialists, or prodigies. But it must be studied intentionally. The central message here is not that education is worthless. It is that financial education is often missing from otherwise successful lives. And when that education is missing, even effort, discipline, and talent may fail to produce freedom. Perhaps the most famous idea in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is also one of the simplest. Poor and middle-class people work for money. Rich people have money work for them. This line captures the book's central premise. Most people spend the majority of their lives trading time for income. They work hours, collect wages, pay bills, and repeat the cycle. Their income depends on ongoing labor. If they stop working, the flow weakens or disappears. Kiyosaki argues that this arrangement creates fragility, even when salaries look impressive on the surface. By contrast, those who build assets, businesses, or investments create systems that can generate cash flow beyond direct labor. The difference is not merely about income level. It is about structure. If a person earns a large salary but has large expenses, debt, and no meaningful assets, that person may still be trapped. If another person earns less but steadily accumulates income-producing assets, that person may be moving toward real financial independence. This is why the book repeatedly insists that wealth is not the same as earnings. Wealth is better understood as the capacity to sustain life without depending entirely on the next paycheck. The deeper challenge in this idea is psychological. Many people are so accustomed to employment-based thinking that they never ask what else is possible. They optimize for raises, promotions, and credentials, but they do not build financial engines outside their jobs. Kiyosaki wants readers to recognize that employment can be useful, but it should not be the only pillar of financial life. A job gives income. An asset can give leverage. A salary can cover present needs. An investment or business can shape future freedom. The book does not argue that everyone should quit working tomorrow. It argues that people should stop mistaking earned income for the complete picture of wealth. Once that distinction is understood, a profound shift begins. Work is no longer seen only as a source of money. It becomes a source of learning, capital, and opportunity that can be redirected into ownership. One of the most vivid ideas in the book is the image of the rat race. Kiyosaki uses this phrase to describe the pattern in which people earn, spend, worry, and repeat. They get jobs to pay bills. Then new income allows new expenses. A bigger house, a nicer car, more subscriptions, more obligations, more debt. What appears to be progress may actually be a more expensive form of dependency. The person must keep working at the same or greater intensity simply to support the lifestyle that has grown around them. This is one reason Rich Dad, Poor Dad speaks so directly to people who look successful on paper yet feel stuck. The book suggests that many financial problems are not caused solely by low income. They are caused by how increased income is used. Instead of buying freedom, people often buy heavier monthly burdens. Kiyosaki asks readers to notice how often social expectations shape financial decisions. A house may be purchased partly for status. A car may be chosen to project success. A career path may be followed because it looks prestigious. But if these choices create permanent pressure, then the external appearance of success may hide internal strain. The rat race is powerful because it feeds on emotion. Fear pushes people to seek security through income. Desire pushes them to spend when income rises. Together, fear and desire keep the cycle moving. The person works because they are afraid of not having enough. Then they reward themselves in ways that create new costs. Then they need the job even more. The pattern can continue for decades. What makes this part of the book memorable is that it names something many people feel but cannot easily explain. They are busy, productive, and even admired, yet they do not feel financially free. Kiyosaki's response is not to shame ambition or comfort. It is to ask a harder question. Are your increasing earnings creating options or merely financing an expanding set of obligations? That question reframes consumption itself. It asks whether purchases are building life or consuming future flexibility. The book's warning is clear. Without financial awareness, higher income can deepen dependence rather than reduce it. If Rich Dad Poor Dad is remembered for one practical concept above all others, it is the distinction between assets and liabilities. Kiyosaki offers a definition that is intentionally simple. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. This phrasing is not meant to replace formal accounting. It is meant to give ordinary people a clear lens through which to evaluate financial decisions. The power of this idea lies in its clarity. Instead of asking whether something is impressive, popular, emotionally satisfying, or culturally admired, Kiyosaki asks a cash flow question. Does this thing produce income or consume it? Does it strengthen your financial position or weaken it over time? This is why the book challenges one of the most emotionally loaded beliefs in personal finance, the assumption that a house is always an asset. Kiyosaki argues that if a house consistently requires mortgage payments, repairs, taxes, insurance, and upkeep without generating income, then it may function more like a liability than people want to admit. The point is not simply to attack homeownership. The deeper point is to train the reader to think beyond labels. A thing is not financially beneficial merely because society says it is. It must be evaluated according to what it actually does in your life. Once readers absorb this distinction, everyday choices begin to look different. A business that produces steady profits is an asset. A rental property with positive cash flow may be an asset. Investments that generate dividends or appreciate intelligently may function as assets. A luxury purchase that drains cash and adds maintenance costs is far more questionable, even if it feels rewarding in the moment. Kiyosaki's larger argument is that wealthy people tend to accumulate assets first and often delay visible consumption. By contrast, many people try to look wealthy before they actually build a financial foundation. The result is that appearances outrun reality. The book encourages a reversal. Build the base first. Let assets grow. Let income-producing structures become stronger. Then optional comforts can be considered from a position of greater strength. Whether or not one agrees with every example Kiyosaki uses, the conceptual tool remains powerful. It teaches readers to ask a more disciplined question of every major financial commitment. Is this putting money into my life or pulling money out of it? For Kiyosaki, the real crisis is not merely low wages or high expenses. It is financial illiteracy. He believes that many people move through adulthood without understanding the basic structures that govern money. They know how to work. They may know how to budget at a surface level, but they do not truly understand financial statements, cash flow, debt, taxes, or the long-term consequences of their decisions. In the book, financial literacy is the ability to read the numbers behind life. It means seeing how income and expenses interact. It means recognizing that an impressive salary can coexist with weak finances. It means understanding the difference between earning more and building stronger foundations. Kiyosaki repeatedly returns to the importance of reading financial statements and thinking in terms of flows rather than appearances. This is part of what makes the book feel empowering to readers. It suggests that wealth is not only about effort or luck. It is also about comprehension. The person who understands money can often make better choices with modest means than the person who earns more but sees less clearly. Financial literacy also changes emotional behavior. When people do not understand money, they are easily ruled by fear, hype, salesmanship, and confusion. They may avoid investing because it seems mysterious. They may buy products they do not need because the marketing is persuasive. They may accept expensive obligations because everyone around them treats those obligations as normal. Financial literacy creates distance from these pressures. It allows a person to pause, examine, compare, and judge. In that sense, financial education is not only technical knowledge. It is a form of independence. It reduces the power of manipulation. It gives people the ability to interpret their own circumstances instead of simply reacting to them. Kiyosaki's message is that schools may teach many useful things, but they often do not teach how money actually behaves in everyday life. So if a person wants financial freedom, that education must often be pursued deliberately and privately. One reason Rich Dad, Poor Dad remains memorable is that it treats money as an emotional subject, not just a numerical one. Kiyosaki argues that fear and desire are two of the most powerful forces in financial life. Fear makes people cling to jobs, avoid risks, and stay inside familiar routines even when those routines are not leading anywhere meaningful. Desire, meanwhile, pushes people to consume, upgrade, and spend in ways that undermine long-term goals. Put together, these emotions can keep intelligent people stuck. A paycheck relieves fear, at least temporarily. New purchases satisfy desire, at least briefly. Then bills return, anxiety returns, and the cycle continues. The insight here is not that emotion is bad. It is that unexamined emotion can quietly govern financial behavior. Many purchases are not really about utility. They're about identity, reassurance, comparison, or reward. Many career choices are not really about growth. They're about avoiding uncertainty. Kiyosaki wants the reader to notice these patterns with unusual honesty. Why do people stay in jobs they dislike? Why do they spend money to look successful? Why do they avoid learning about investing? Often the answer is not lack of intelligence. It is discomfort. Fear of losing, fear of looking foolish, fear of being wrong, fear of stepping outside social expectations. What makes this discussion valuable is that it moves personal finance beyond formulas. It reminds us that money decisions are made by human beings carrying emotion, memory, ego, and insecurity. To become financially stronger, one must often become psychologically more aware. That means learning to tolerate uncertainty, delaying gratification, and observing impulses instead of instantly obeying them. It also means separating self-worth from visible consumption. Kiyosaki's version of financial maturity is not just knowing facts. It is learning not to be controlled by the emotional rhythms that keep people trapped in repetitive financial patterns. A major theme in the book is the difference between labor and ownership. Employees sell time, effort, and skill in exchange for wages. Owners build or control systems that can produce value repeatedly. Investors place capital into vehicles that may grow or generate returns over time. Kiyosaki does not deny the dignity of work, but he insists that labor alone rarely creates durable financial freedom. To move toward independence, one must gradually shift from pure income dependence to some form of ownership. This might mean starting a business, buying productive assets, investing intelligently, or developing income streams that do not require constant direct effort. The key idea is leverage. A system can work beyond the limits of one's immediate time. A business can serve customers when the owner is not present every second. An investment can appreciate while one is doing something else. A property can generate income if structured well. Ownership changes the relationship between effort and reward. In a job, output is often capped by salary structures, organizational hierarchies, and time limits. In ownership, there may be greater risk, but also greater scalability and flexibility. Kiyosaki's challenge is not that everyone must become a founder overnight. It is that every person should begin thinking beyond wages alone. What can be built? What can be owned? What can be learned now that later becomes a recurring source of value? This focus on systems helps explain the book's entrepreneurial appeal. It frames wealth not as a pile of money, but as a structure that can continue to produce economic life. Seen this way, ownership is not just a business concept. It is a philosophy of freedom. It asks how much of your future depends entirely on your next hour of labor, and how much is supported by assets and systems you have already created. One of the more interesting parts of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is its advice about careers and skill building. Kiyosaki argues that people often focus too narrowly on secure income and not enough on broad learning. In his view, this is a mistake. A job should not be judged only by salary. It should also be judged by what it teaches. Does it build sales ability, communication, negotiation, leadership, management, understanding of systems, confidence? Kiyosaki believes that financially successful people often combine multiple forms of intelligence. They may understand money, but they also know how to present ideas, read situations, persuade others, and act decisively. This is why he warns against becoming too specialized too early if that specialization leaves a person financially naive or socially limited. A person may become technically excellent and still remain economically vulnerable if they cannot manage money, recognize opportunities, or communicate value. The broader lesson is that practical growth is often cross-disciplinary. The world rewards people who can connect ideas, navigate uncertainty, and turn knowledge into action. Kiyosaki's emphasis on learning also helps correct a common misunderstanding of the book. It does not tell people merely to chase money. In many places, it suggests the opposite. Chase skills. Chase understanding. Chase competence. Money becomes more manageable when the person handling it becomes more capable. This is a valuable principle beyond finance. It suggests that early stages of life and work should be used not only to earn, but to build a toolkit. Sales teaches courage. Communication teaches influence. Accounting teaches clarity. Business teaches structure. Negotiation teaches leverage. Over time, these abilities make financial opportunities more visible and more actionable. Kiyosaki wants readers to see themselves not as passive workers hoping to be rewarded, but as developing economic agents capable of shaping outcomes through skill and understanding. Another key idea in the book is that opportunities are not distributed only by chance. They are often distributed by perception. Two people can stand in the same environment and notice very different things. One sees danger everywhere and withdraws. Another sees patterns, openings, inefficiencies, and possibilities. Kiyosaki argues that the wealthy often appear lucky because they are trained to notice what others overlook. This does not mean luck is unreal. It means preparation changes what counts as visible. Financial education sharpens perception. Experience reduces paralysis. Confidence allows action. Together, these factors make opportunity easier to identify and more possible to pursue. The book frequently encourages readers to think differently about risk. Kiyosaki does not deny that risk exists. Instead, he suggests that ignorance itself is one of the greatest risks. A person who avoids all movement because they fear loss may remain trapped in a slow, socially approved form of insecurity. The safer-looking path is not always safer in the long run. A lifetime of dependence on wages, debt, or underdeveloped financial knowledge can be deeply risky, even if it feels normal. What matters, then, is not reckless courage, but informed courage. Learn enough to judge better. Observe enough to see patterns. Practice enough to reduce emotional overreaction. Over time, what once looked terrifying may begin to look manageable. This theme matters because many readers approach finance with a sense of exclusion. They assume that investing, entrepreneurship, or asset building belongs to some other type of person. Rich Dad Poor Dad pushes against that assumption. It suggests that opportunity is not only out there somewhere. It can become more visible as the mind changes. The first step is learning to ask better questions. What is the real cost here? Where is the cash flow? What is the downside? What is the upside? What skill do I need in order to understand this clearly? When questions become sharper, the landscape itself begins to change. Kiyosaki also spends time on taxes, corporations, and the structural differences between earning as an employee and operating as an owner. His treatment is simplified and provocative, but the broader lesson is important. Financial outcomes are shaped not only by effort, but by structures. Institutions, legal forms, tax systems, and incentive frameworks all matter. A person who understands these systems can often operate more efficiently than someone who merely works hard within them. This part of the book can be controversial because it is sometimes expressed in sweeping language. But underneath the provocation is a useful insight. The economy is not neutral or flat. Different kinds of participants play by different practical rules. Employees are often taxed in one sequence. Business owners may have different deductions and different strategic options. Investors learn to think in terms of returns, timing, structure, and efficiency. Kiyosaki's point is that people should stop behaving as though financial life were a simple moral equation where hard work alone automatically produces the best outcomes. Hard work matters, but so do knowledge, structure, and positioning. This does not mean exploiting loopholes irresponsibly. It means becoming informed. It means understanding that systems reward those who learn how they function. A financially literate person asks not only how much something earns, but how it is structured, how it is taxed, and how it fits into a broader plan. The deeper principle is one of agency. The less you understand the structures around money, the more likely you are to remain reactive. The more you understand them, the more deliberate your decisions can become. Although Rich Dad, Poor Dad is mostly a mindset book, it does deliver several practical lessons that readers can carry into ordinary life. First, pay close attention to cash flow. A high income is less meaningful if expenses rise to match it. Second, begin distinguishing clearly between assets and liabilities. Ask what each major purchase actually does to your monthly and long-term financial position. Third, resist lifestyle inflation. An increase in income should strengthen your base before it expands your consumption. Fourth, treat financial education as a lifelong responsibility. Learn the language of money instead of outsourcing all understanding to others. Fifth, use work strategically. A job can provide stability, but it can also provide skills, capital, and insight that help you build something beyond the job itself. Sixth, focus on ownership where possible. Even small steps toward assets, investments, or side income can begin changing the structure of dependence. Seventh, study your own emotional habits with money. Notice fear, impulse, comparison, and reward-seeking behavior. Without this awareness, good intentions are easily overwhelmed by old patterns. Kiyosaki's larger practical message is that wealth is built through habits of perception and allocation, not through appearances. Financial progress may look quiet for a long time. It may involve learning, saving, buying carefully, and resisting pressure to display success prematurely. But over time, these quieter actions compound. The reader is meant to leave the book with a more disciplined internal dialogue. Not, can I afford this right now, but what does this do to my future? Not, how can I make more only through labor, but what can I build that continues to work? Not, what looks successful from the outside, but what creates resilience from the inside? These questions are practical because they can be asked every week, every month, and at every major financial crossroads. It is also worth reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad with both openness and discernment. The book is powerful, but it is not comprehensive financial advice. It simplifies certain concepts for impact. It relies heavily on stories and contrasts. Some of its claims are better understood as motivational framing than as literal universal rules. Readers should not mistake it for a complete manual on investing, tax planning, homeownership, or retirement strategy. At the same time, dismissing it because it is simplified would miss its real contribution. The book's purpose is not primarily technical precision. Its purpose is mental reorientation. It questions assumptions that many people never examine. It helps readers notice the gap between earning and building. It introduces the language of assets, liabilities, cash flow, and financial literacy in a way that feels accessible. For many people, that first shift matters enormously. A mindset book should be judged partly by the conversations it starts in the reader's own mind. Rich Dad, Poor Dad succeeds because it often causes a person to pause and rethink ordinary behavior. That pause can be valuable, even if later one supplements the book with more detailed, evidence-based financial learning. In that sense, the wisest approach is to use the book as an awakening, not as a final authority. Let it challenge passivity. Let it sharpen awareness. Let it motivate deeper study, but also bring judgment, context, and realism. The book opens a door. What the reader builds after walking through that door will depend on further learning, discipline, and responsible action. At the deepest level, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not just about money. It is about freedom, choice, and the cost of living unconsciously. Kiyosaki believes that many people inherit a script for life without ever examining whether that script leads where they truly want to go. Study, work, earn, spend, repeat. The pattern can become so normal that it no longer feels like a choice. This book interrupts that rhythm. It asks the reader to look again. It asks whether security without understanding is really security. It asks whether visible success without ownership is really success. It asks whether a life shaped entirely by bills and obligations can honestly be called freedom. The most enduring contribution of the book is that it makes financial awareness feel personal. Money is not presented merely as arithmetic. It is presented as architecture. The architecture of your habits, your fears, your ambitions, your learning, your decisions, and your future. If you never study that architecture, you may live inside a structure built by default. If you do study it, you gain the chance to redesign it. That redesign does not have to be dramatic at first. It can begin with a question, a habit, a spreadsheet, a new skill, a smaller purchase, a more thoughtful investment, a refusal to expand lifestyle too quickly, a decision to learn what your money is actually doing. In that sense, the book's message is both radical and ordinary. Radical because it challenges deep cultural assumptions. Ordinary because its starting point is simple attention. Notice what is flowing in and out. Notice what you own and what owns you. Notice where fear is making your choices smaller than they need to be. Notice where desire is tempting you to buy appearance instead of substance. Financial freedom in this framework is not only a number. It is a condition in which your life is no longer governed entirely by financial pressure. It is the point at which money becomes a tool, not a master. And the path toward that freedom begins with understanding, long before it shows up as wealth.